Hi, welcome to Storytime in the Pollinator Garden. I'm Pam from Lincoln City Libraries, and this is Courtney and Sheldon from the University of Nebraska Bee Lab.
We've teamed up to bring your family some exciting and interesting information about pollinators. Hopefully, you can use this information to help pollinators in your part of the world.
Okay, so where do wild bees live? We know honeybees live in a hive, but wild bees have many different homes. And Courtney and Sheldon are going to teach us about the habitats of wild bees and show us how to make a wild bee hotel. What do we have here in the Pollinator Garden?
Yeah, so here in the Pollinator Garden, we have this really neat setup where we've put essentially habitats for wild bees to live in.
Cool.
So a lot of people know about honeybees, but they're not familiar with the fact that we have wild bees, right? Honeybees are just one species, but there are thousands of other bee species besides just the little honeybee, right?
Okay.
Apis mellifera.
Okay.
So essentially, these wild bees, there's ground dwelling, so they bury into the ground.
Okay.
And that's most of where like these other native bees live. And then there's native bees that live in cavities and stems.
Okay.
So here what we've done is created some really cool cavity dwelling homes for bees by drilling holes in wood.
Okay.
And so what they do is they come in to these holes, and they're solitary bees. So they just lay their eggs in these little tunnels. They put a little bit of pollen, so food for their babies.
Okay.
And then they cap it off. So you can see here how these are specifically leafcutter bees, and they've come in and they've capped off their babies that they've laid, their little eggs, with different leaf material. So the different kinds of bees will use different material, whether that's mud, leaves. Some will use like orchid bees will use like flower petals, which are really pretty.
Okay.
So yeah, so we've created just different habitat for native bees to lay their eggs in, which is pretty exciting. And you can also see we have different sizes of holes because there's different sizes of bees.
Okay.
So just like people, some people like to live in little tiny homes, right? Like these tiny holes.
Yeah.
And some like to live in big mansions. So we've got bigger holes for those larger sized bees.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So so now I can show you kind of some different habitats that we've made for native bees, and we'll even get to show how to build one. So if people want to put them in their own backyard, they can.
Cool. That sounds great.
Yeah.
So what have we got here?
Yeah, so going off of what we just saw, we have some more examples of habitats for wild bees. So this here is a fun one because essentially in this one block, we have the different diameter holes, like what we talked about before. And this one's fun because it has a little roof overhang, so it just keeps, rain and water from directly hitting those little cappings of the baby bees. So, and there's just so many different fun examples of that. This one you can even see the different colors of leaves and materials that were used to cap the nest. And they're super easy to make. As you can see, you really just need to drill in some wood, some non-treated wood preferably, because remember, it's the little baby bees are being laid in there. So you definitely don't want anything that's going to, emanate any chemicals or stuff like that. So, and then this is another, just our final fun example of these drilled holes in the wood. And what we've done is a cutaway. So you can actually see how they've laid their eggs and then they've put in different vegetation material throughout this whole entire channel, which is just super fun to be able to actually see what's going on inside of this nest. And I'll talk about this one in a minute, but first I just wanted to show you all the really neat species of native bees. And these are obviously just a small sample of what's out there, not just in Nebraska, 300, 400 species in Nebraska, but the whole world. So we just have some really neat comparisons of, our bumblebees compared to wasps, flies, and moths. And I love this demonstration because it shows mimicry in nature. And so many people will see these little flies and think it's a bee. When really it's just a harmless little fly. And that's just a fun note too, is these solitary bees, because they don't live in a big hive and have a lot of resources to protect, they will not sting, which is really cool. So these habitats that you can even have in your own backyard are completely safe to have. So you can build them with kids and have these bees flying around and you don't have to worry about getting stung.
Okay, okay, awesome.
Yeah, and these are just some more examples. The green halictid bee is always super fun because it's green and shiny, and people will see that one quite often, along with some of our carpenter bees are really important and neat to see as well.
So these are pretty common for this area.
Yes, yep. And like I said, in these displays, we have some examples of flies and wasps, so you can kind of see a comparison of basically just comparing just different mimics of bees. So yeah,
very cool.
And then finally we have this nest type. So we've talked about the wood cavities, and unfortunately we don't really have like a ground dwelling bee example, but it is important to note that most native bees actually do live in the ground. They bury little cavities, little tunnels into the ground. So if you want to help those bees, just leave a little patch of dirt.
So maybe don't mulch your whole garden, leave a spot that can make a little mud or dirt or something.
Yes, that would be perfect.
Okay.
But then for our third type, our little stem dwelling bees, we've made this native bee nest so that you can create the frame and again, a nice little roof overhang and stuff it with different kinds of stems, whether that's like these paper straws or these are just different stems that we've pulled from plants that have expired for the year because and we'll learn about this from Sheldon, but this is where bees naturally live, right? So honestly, you can make these different habitats, but the most important thing that you can do is plant native plants. Because that provides them with food, but it also provides them with a native habitat.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so pretty neat. So Sheldon is actually now gonna show us how we can make this structure so that anyone can, build one of these and put them in their backyard.
Cool.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Sheldon from the UNLV lab, and he's gonna show us how to make a wild bee hotel.
All right, so we're gonna give you guys the cut list, but it's pretty simple. There's only 2 types of wood you're gonna need, and remember to go with untreated wood because this is gonna be the nursery for all those little solitary nesting bees, and we wanna make sure that the walls of their nursery don't have chemicals leaching in. So here's all of our untreated wood. Got my bottom, my sides, my top, and my back. So you can stuff this. It's gonna look a lot like a birdhouse, but you can put in blocks of wood or you can put inside those stems. So either one, it'll be just a cavity and you can fill it with whatever you want to have for the bees in your yard. So I'm gonna start by just nailing my bottom to my sides.
Can people buy kits? Just out of curiosity.
I don't know if they...
Okay, but this is something you can find online too.
Yes, you can purchase these from stores, but this is a homemade one that we made. And then I'm just gonna make sure everything's nice and straight. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm sure the bees won't complain as long as they've got somewhere dry that they can nest.
Well, do you want to talk about like the ones that are in stores and what
So as you can see with this nest structure, it's kind of long. And the reason we did that is because a lot of places, if it's really short, like what Courtney said, they'll have male bees are towards the front and female bees are towards the back. So the longer we have this, the more bees we can get in there. And we're shooting for between 4 to 6 inches. And so this is about 5.5 inches long. And so that means we can get probably a decent amount of bees inside of here. If it's a lot shorter, it's gonna be a boys club and you'll only have males usually in the front.
Okay.
So I've drilled all my pilot holes and now...
Talk about how that makes it kid friendly, so to do with the kids at home.
Yeah, so I've drilled all my pilot holes to attach the bottoms and the sides. And that's gonna make it nice and kid friendly, so you can just put those nails in there and all you gotta do is hold it semi-straight and a couple smacks and you're gonna have it attached. Finally, for my back,
Okay.
we come in from behind. And then I'll finish it up.
Is this a hole so you can hang it?
Yep. So we've got a hole in the back so you can hang it on the side of your house. Again, somewhere where it's not going to get blown away. We like to have them oriented towards the south or southeast or southwest, because then they can get a little bit of sun, and that just helps warm them up, because at night, while they're doing the construction process inside their homes, the bees are going to be facing in and they're going to be sleeping at night. So you want to have that morning sun come and warm them up, so you face them to the southeast. They'll have a nice warm morning sun, and then they'll get started early in the morning. Usually bumblebees and a lot of native bees get started earlier in the morning. Some species are so specialized, they have huge eyes, and they actually fly at dusk and dawn only. So you'll have really cool activity happening at all times of the day. And so there's our completed nest. We got a nice overhang. We got a hole to hang it on the side of our house, or we say don't hang them on trees or anywhere where predators are going to get really easy access to them. So, and again, because these bees are not going to sting you unless you try to kill them or swat at them, you can put this near your house, on your deck, or anywhere.
And then
we like to say keep it about 4 feet above the ground. Because if you set this directly on the ground, you're going to have stuff that's creepy crawlies are going to come in, and they might be predators on those bees.
So what do we stuff it with?
So we can stuff it with stuff we've gathered from our own garden, or we can stuff it with purchased tubes. These purchased tubes, the nice part about the purchased tubes, these are for the orchard mason bee. So the size hole is for the orchard mason bee that Courtney talked about. And they also have removable straws and a back. But the cool thing is nature makes these for us, and it makes it for us in a variety of sizes in the form of reeds. And I'm going to show you guys the plants that you guys can use and plant in your own garden, that you can make your own bundles to put inside. And again, you don't have to be super fancy. You can see I can just stick these in and trim them. So when I'm arranging the sticks and the hollow reeds to put inside of this nest, I'm going to make sure that when I've cut them, they have a nodule, usually where the leaves grow. That's basically going to be a back. And so when I trim them, I want to make sure that there's a nodule here, and then it's open and hollow to the front. You can see that right here. It's hollow to the front, and then there's a nice little nub, and that's going to be where that wall inside of the plant starts. So when I put them in there, I want to have that part to the back. And like you can see here, there's my nodule where the leaves grew, and then it's hollow to the front. I can stick it into the back, and then I can trim it up. So like I was saying, it doesn't need to be perfect, but I'm just going to take this and I'm going to trim it across the front, because I just don't want them to get too much moisture. So there they are, trimmed across the front. You can see they're nice and hollow. Again, the bees aren't going to mind as long as there's a nice home to use.
And it's good to stuff it full, right?
Yep, I will stuff it all the way full. And I like to use these reeds, but I'd like to put a wooden block inside, and then I'll stuff reeds along the sides to kind of tighten up that wood block inside of here.
So the wood block with the holes drilled in it.
Yep, and you can vary it up. One year you can use a wood block, one year you can use all reeds, or you can do a nice mix and match.
So do you need to change these out every year?
Yes, so in order to avoid diseases and mites and pollen mites and parasite wasps that'll actually come back to the same spot, what I would recommend is you're gonna replace these every year. So when the bees are emerging, you can take them out, and this is a really fun part. You can put them inside of a shoebox, cut a small hole in the shoebox, and then as those things will emerge, as the bees emerge, they go towards the light and then they won't come back. If you just leave this outside, you can see them emerging, but they might come back to the same home and recolonize it. So that's one way to do it. You can also just leave them, and then you can just remove them and set them a little bit lower, and then they'll usually come up to the new ones that are in your box. So you can take them out, and then you can kind of bundle them with a rubber band and put them nearby. Those bees will emerge, go into the new ones that you have that are empty in your box.
Okay.
All right, so we're here in the Pollinator Garden, and I'm going to show you how we can use these plants that we've got that are native to North America. So they're going to be feeding a lot of these native bees, and they're also going to be great because at the end of the year, as you can see, they're starting to die down, but we can trim them up and create our own bee nests without having to make a bee hotel.
Okay.
So the bee hotel is great. We can put that near our house. We can watch them doing their thing all year long. But some people don't want to do that much work, right? They don't want to trim this up. They don't want to make their bundles. They don't want to build that house. So what we can do is if we literally just plant a plant like this Joe Pye weed, at the end of the year, most people clean up their garden, right?
Right.
So the best thing you can do, if you want to do the most good for nature, you can leave up your plants all winter long so birds can eat the seeds.
Okay.
But sometimes people think they look a little bit kind of rough towards the end of the year. So if you're going to trim them up, what you should do is you should trim to about 2 feet to, at a minimum, 18 inches off the ground. Prefer 2 feet, but if maybe it's the front yard and you don't want anyone complaining, at least 18 inches.
Okay.
So if I'm gonna trim this whole thing down to 18 inches, and it doesn't need to be perfect, you don't even really need to measure it, but just remember, those bees are gonna want at least 6 inches and 8 inches. This will probably be just one bee that's inside of this one. So the more of these empty stems you have, the better. And you can see I've got this year's growth, and I've got even some of last year's growth down here. And so this is how I need to be trimming it so that.
And you trim this in the fall?
You can trim in the fall or the spring.
Or spring, okay.
Yep, and so if you're gonna prefer to not cut right above a nodule, because then it's gonna be blocked, but you wanna make sure that it's nice and hollow when you look down.
So cut below the nodule then?
Below where you see this, where the leaves are gonna grow. These bees are gonna find these holes.
Cool.
And these are going to be here all year long.
Okay.
Then I'm going to have new growth. I'm going to trim the same thing, and then these will be rotten by that point.
Okay.
So it's a constantly renewing, refreshing bee nest that all I have to do is once a year trim to 18 to 2 feet.
Okay.
18 inches to 2 feet tall, and I don't have to do any work.
Okay.
So that works with Joe Pye weed species. It'll even work with some of these small black-eyed Susans.
Okay.
You can just trim them. And even those teeny tiny little holes, those bees will nest inside.
Awesome. I'm going to go home and do this because I have this at my house. So.
Exactly. And let's say you trim it and you see a white pith inside and you think, oh no, bees aren't going to use that. Well, bees are just like birds. You have primary cavity nesters and you have secondary cavity nesters.
Okay.
So some bees don't want to nest in a hollow hole. They want to have a pith that they get to chew through. Oh, and they'll only go into pithy ones, and some will only go into empty ones. Okay. So if you have a pithy stem, still leave it, and those bees will use that too.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for joining us for Storytime in the Pollinator Garden.
And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, either the Lincoln Libraries or the University of Nebraska-Lincoln Bee Lab.
And remember, to help all pollinators, you don't have to have honeybees or build anything special. You just need to plant plants in your yard and not spray as many pesticides.
Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.